The New York Giants have made a decision. They're bringing back Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. Is it the right move? And what is now the plan going forward now that they're returning? We're going to talk about that and more on today's Locked On Giants podcast, coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, to my everydayers, to my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Giant fans, as I kind of suspected would be the case, Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen, they will be back in 2025. The decision was made early on Monday morning. The Giants sent out a general statement on behalf of John Mara, making the announcement. Really not a surprise. This is how it was kind of leaning. I know some of you are disappointed by the decision, but this is kind of how it was leaning. And so on today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about the decision, why it's really not necessarily the wrong decision, why I think it's the right decision. We'll talk about some of the changes we could probably expect now that these two guys are going to be back, because both guys are obviously going to have to make some changes. And we'll also talk about the impact of the franchise. So this is just some of the topics we're going to talk about today. And basically all week, there's just so much that went on Monday down at the Giants the Giants headquarters, I should say. You know, we had the players, we had Daboll, Schoen, John Mara. There's just so much to talk about this week. And I'm going to, gradually get through everything with you over the next few days on different shows. So I hope you will continue to tune in. All right. So was this the right decision? Folks, I know some of you are going to say you disagree with this, but I do think this was the right decision to keep Schoen and Daboll for another year. All right. Now, those of you who have followed me or read me or listen every day, you know that I'm somewhat of a Giant historian. I have covered this team since, going back to the Dan Reeves era. I have followed the team as a fan before that, going back to the Ray Perkins era. So I have seen the highs, the lows, and everything in between with this team. Historically speaking, the Giants have had this situation before where, the franchise has just floundered and flopped and everybody was screaming for a change. Of course, not, to the degree it is today, because we didn't have social media back then. But, you go back and you look and you say to yourself, well, gosh, if Wellington Mara, God rest his soul, if he had gotten rid of, George Young and Bill Parcells when he had the opportunity to do so, would the Giants have gone on to win their first two championships in the in the modern era, the Super Bowl era? If the Giants had gotten rid of Tom Coughlin, for those of you who are a little maybe younger, don't remember the Parcells era, would they have gone on, the Giants, to win two more Super Bowls? So, now this isn't to say that I'm comparing Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll to George Young, who obviously is a Hall of Famer, Bill Parcells, a Hall of Famer, Tom Coughlin, who should be a Hall of Famer in my opinion. Hopefully he'll be one before too long. Ernie Accorsi, who I think is one of the most underrated general managers, to walk into the Giants building, maybe even in the entire NFL. But anyway, this is to say, the point that I'm trying to make is you got to be patient. It is far too easy when things are going wrong to say, that's it, I'm done, I don't need this anymore, let's make changes. But this is why, some of you have asked me, you're like, well, how can you be so calm? How could you say this, this, and this? Because I keep emotion out of it, folks. And look, you guys pay your money. You're welcome to react and say whatever you want and think whatever you want. But I'm speaking for myself here. Okay. I think you have to keep emotion out of it. And you have to say to yourself, okay, they started to build something. Right now, it doesn't look like, a beautiful, luxurious garden or apartment or whatever, symbol you want to use, but the pieces are in place. And it's just a matter of bringing it all together and making it into something that everybody can be proud of. If you were to pull the plug on both of these guys, you would basically be starting from scratch again. And then you would have to endure more misery. Okay. You'd have to at least another 2 years. Now, some of you will say, well, the Washington Commanders turned it around and they had a new coaching staff, a new GM, a new quarterback. Yeah, they also had new ownership. So everything was brand new. All right. So you have to build up. I mean, as even the Eagles, who won the NFC East this year, they needed time to build up. And now look at them today. All right. So you have to be patient. I know it's hard to do. I know it's easier said than done. And I've said millions of times that you guys deserve the best product possible from the Giants organization. And they know you deserve it too. But you have to have a degree of patience. Now, some of you are probably saying, well, what have they shown that I should have patience? Why, put trust in Schoen and Daboll? You can look at the 2024 draft class. You can look at the fact that Daboll didn't lose the team. You could look at the fact that, he was the 2022 coach of the year. He figured out how to bring them all together for the first time, working with a staff that, a lot of members he had never worked before and just pulling them all together. And you say to yourself, okay, if they had had better quarterback play, if they had had, maybe a little bit better defensive scheme that fit their personnel, might they have had better results? If they could figure out how to stop the injury bug, from wrecking this team every year, which seems to be a problem that nobody seems to have an answer to, might things have been different? These are all fair questions to ask. But to sit there and say, okay, well, Daboll has shown nothing, Schoen has shown nothing. All right, yes, the guys have made mistakes, and I'll go into them, in the next segment. But they've also have the pieces for the foundation in place. And it's a matter of maybe tweaking that a little bit and then building on it. And the top thing that they're going to have to add, obviously, is the quarterback. And, Schoen was asked about it on Monday during his presser. And he said, look, I'm not going to pull any Hail Marys. I'm going to be smart about this. We're going to build this and we're going to be patient. And that's what you have to do. Because, look, the number one concern I think a lot of people have is, okay, Joe, Brian, you've been given another year. If you don't get to the playoffs, you're out next year. I don't think John Mara has put that mandate on them. Does he want to see improvement? Yes. What constitutes improvement? Is it in wins and losses? Is it in, just being better on week 18 than you were in week 1, eliminating penalties, being a little bit more fluid, I should say, in the systems that are in place? These are all things that you can look for. And John Mara is the type of owner, and he said it today, that he is at practice every day. He witnesses what they do. He observes. And, he felt comfortable enough to say, okay, look, this team is still buying into what Daboll is selling. And that went a long way to, making the decision to keep him. Okay. Other things that I think went into this decision on behalf of ownership. They like the personnel department that Joe Schoen has built. He added some of his own scouts. He recreated or tweaked the way they were scouting and grading and evaluating players. I guess they have a committee type of approach when it comes to evaluations. Um, just, little things like that. And with Brian obviously, he has a big staff, but it's a collaborative effort. Now, whether you agree with a collaborative effort or you don't, that's up to you. But Mara, obviously, and Steve Tisch, I would assume, comfortable with the direction. And so Schoen and Daboll are each going to get another opportunity to get this team back on track. Will they be able to do it? Well, they're going to have to make a few changes, as I said. What are those changes? I'm going to go more so into the ones I think Schoen needs to make right after this. Hey, Giant fans, it's playoff time. And if you're like me, you want to make the most out of these final weeks of football action. That's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and you want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns, and for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in as less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, Price Picks has you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. It's so easy to use. These payouts are super fast. You can get your money in as little as 15 minutes when your picks hit. Plus, the weekly promos like Taco Tuesday discounts add even more value to the lineups. So here's a special offer for Locked On listeners. Download the app today and use the promo code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And all this week, we've got plenty more from Monday's final media session for the 2024 season. We still, players spoke, injury updates, personnel things, all kinds of little things that we still need to talk about. So, I'm going to go through all of that. I still want to go through what Joe Schoen had to say and really dive into that and come up with takeaways. I know, by tomorrow when I do the show, some of that stuff might be old, but you know me, I'll probably have a fresh perspective or two on some of these things. But anyway, what I want to talk about now is the changes. Now, if you are an everydayer, you know that I've spoken about some of the changes that Brian Daboll needs to make. And interestingly, John Mara, when he spoke to the media, he spoke about a couple of the changes that I feel very strongly about. The defensive scheme and whether Shane Bowen is the right guy to be running the defense, which I don't think he is, and also Daboll calling the plays, which, as you guys know, has not worked out and I think needs to change. All right. So those are a few things right off the bat there that need to change. But I want to talk about Joe Schoen and what he needs to change, because that's not really talked about, because, that's more behind the scenes stuff. This is just my take, my impressions from being inside the building, whenever they let us in, from people that I've spoken with, observations that I've made. But here's what I think I would like to see Joe Schoen change, and that is how he handles Brian Daboll. Now, I have always gotten the impression that Schoen and Daboll are kind of equal in a way. Even though Schoen is the GM, he is technically above Daboll on the org chart. What he says should go. I've always gotten the impression, though, that the two of them, for whatever reason, that Schoen kind of brings himself down to the same level as Daboll, and that he lets Brian run the football team however he sees fit. Schoen runs the personnel department. They work hand in hand. Don't get me wrong, that's important. But Schoen doesn't speak up enough if Brian is maybe going down the wrong path. That needs to change. And I'll give you guys a perfect example. Okay. So, that I have spoken a lot about Brian Daboll and how he handles preseason snap distribution, how he believes that, okay, you know what? We had a joint practice with a couple days with the Lions, a couple days with the Jets. The starters got quality work, so they don't need to play in the preseason. You know that I feel strongly that that has to change. So the question then becomes is, has Joe ever gone to Brian and say, hey, Brian, why don't you rethink this? Because 2 years in a row now, we have come out at the gate in week one looking like we haven't played in over a month. And you know what, folks? That's because they haven't. They have rested the starters. And you know how I have said that joint practice snaps are not the same as live game snaps. I don't care that they're not game planning. You cannot replicate live game snaps in joint practices. There's no tackling involved. The quarterback is not hit. Everything gets thrown out of whack. So that would be something. And I know for a fact that Joe doesn't necessarily agree with how Brian has done training camp snaps in the past. So now Joe has got to be more of a boss, if you will, and go to Brian and say, hey, Brian, look, this isn't working. I want you to do it this way. Now, I suspect part of the reason why maybe Joe hasn't done that is because of the level of respect he has for Brian. The two men are friends. Their wives are friendly. They look at it as they're in this together. And they are to a degree. But there has to be a level where Joe says, okay, I'm the GM. It starts with me. If I see something that's being done that I disagree with, this has to change. And I don't think Joe has done a good job of that at all. Why? I couldn't tell you. Again, I think it could be a respect thing, but that definitely has to change. What else would Joe have to change? Well, I guess you could say maybe tighten up the number of people who are involved in the decision-making process. Because right now, even though Joe's got a good group around him, as far as advisors go, there is such a thing where if you have 10 different people in a room, you're going to get 10 different opinions. And the more you model a decision, the more likely you are to make a mistake. So, I don't know if Joe set it up that way because he was a new GM and he just wanted to have the security of having other guys around him who had experience, whatever the case may be. But I would maybe eliminate some of the layers of that group. Maybe you could start off with a big group and then maybe eliminate it, have those guys talk to the guys who ultimately are going to advise Shane. But right now, I just get the impression, and we saw this on Hard Knocks, by the way. So it's not that I'm speaking out of turn or anything like this, but limit the group because you don't need 20 different opinions in a room. You really don't. You're just muddling the whole situation. And that's where you make mistakes. So that's something I would like to see Joe maybe look to change. I've also spoken in the past about valuing players and how I feel that, Shane sometimes doesn't really have a good grasp of how to value the players. We saw it with, the chance to trade Azeez Ojulari, which didn't go down because Joe wanted a fourth. And I think the best he was being offered was a fifth. We saw it with Saquon Barkley this year, where he was like, okay, you know what? I was so disgusted with how negotiations went the last year that Saquon, you go out and get a deal and we'll see if we can match it. No, I don't want to see that ever again. All right. If you want a guy back badly enough, don't let the market set the price for him. Don't worry about if you're going to piss him off, which is what Joe said in Hard Knocks. Make up your mind. What is that guy worth to you? What can you afford? If the offer pisses him off, guess what? He's going to walk away anyway. All right. So that approach to me, that's got to change for Joe Schoen as well. So, the bottom line, folks, is that it's a learning experience. One of the drawbacks when you hire a first-time GM, a first-time head coach is they learn on the job. They're going to make mistakes. Heck, even experienced coaches and GMs make mistakes, but not as frequently as new first time GMs and head coaches. Can you learn from them? That's where you separate the guys with the promise versus the guys who really aren't going to be around long in this league. All right. So, with that all said, with the decisions now made, again, what is the plan going forward and the impact of this plan that the Giants have going forward? Going to talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, if you love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy, check out Game Time. Game Time has made it so much easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time's vast inventory and flash deals offer you loads of options, plus they make the ticket buying experience so easy. Their super deals were particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Hey, Giant fans. So you've heard me talk about my Blue Crew community members. And if you're looking to join an exclusive community of Big Blue Faithful where you can discuss the team and its moves and receive inside information in a toxic free environment, then you got to check out the Locked On Giants Blue Crew community. Members get to join our by invitation only Discord channel where we can talk with one another, we can ask questions, we get breaking news, and so much more. Plus, as part of the Locked On Giants Blue Crew community, you get your exclusive updates texted directly to your phone by yours truly. And you get to text me directly. So, did you know you could also try this out for free for 14 days to see if you like it? If you like it, you do nothing and continue for just $4.99 a month. But here's a little secret. For a limited time only, you can get your first 2 months of Blue Crew community subscription at a 50% discount when you use the promo code Blue Crew. That's BLUECREW. For more information or to register, visit joinsubtext.com/LockedOnNYGiants. And don't forget that promo code Blue Crew to get your 50% discount off your first 2 months after your free 14-day trial period ends. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Treda, and I want to thank you all for, first off, I want to start by thanking you guys for staying with me all season long. This was not a very fun or enjoyable season for all of us involved with the Giants, whether you're a fan, whether you're media. This was a difficult one, but a lot of you stayed with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast, and it is appreciated. And then I also want to thank you guys real quick. I know I wanted to get this pod out a little bit earlier than I did today, but there was just so much information to sort through and just going back and forth and sorting through it. And I'm still going through it all because I want to make sure I leave no stone unturned and I cover everything for you guys because you guys deserve it. So anyway, thank you. Let's get back to our program. So Schoen and Daboll are back. The impact of the franchise is set. So where do we go from here? Obviously, the first priority, the top priority is to get a quarterback. Now, here's something that's interesting. Somebody in our Blue Crew community actually asked me and said, "Hey, Pat, do you think it is possible now that Schoen and Daboll are back that they're going to feel pressured to where they have to get a quarterback and they could potentially make a mistake by overdrafting somebody, for example?" And I thought about that and I said, that could be a possibility, but it's something that Schoen and Daboll need to guard against. Now, right now, everybody, it seems, wants the Giants to draft either Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. And that's it. All right. The Giants, as you guys know, they're drafting third. They could have a chance at one of those quarterbacks. Although this news out of Cleveland about Deshaun Watson having had a setback with his Achilles injury could muddy those waters. But anyway, everybody wants the Giants to draft one of those quarterbacks. Folks, right now, even though the Giants have done a lot of work on those quarterbacks so far, Daboll and the coaches have got to get their say with getting, taking up close looks at these guys. And I fully expect that to happen, once they settle these last few, weeks of evaluating the roster, the personnel and whatnot. That's going to all take place. But here's the thing, guys. You can't put pressure on yourself and say, oh my God, we've got to find the next Eli Manning. There might not be an Eli Manning in this draft. There might be. We don't know. But they have to do their due diligence, because the last thing you want to see them do is overdraft somebody, make a mistake, and now you're going to have to start from scratch. So, with that said, you cannot rule out the Giants potentially, instead of going for an Eli Manning in the draft, maybe they go for a Kerry Collins in free agency. Get a veteran in here to serve as a bridge guy. Maybe that guy turns out to be good enough to where you can carry him for the next 2, 3, 4 years. All right. So the quarterback situation, definitely a priority. I think we can all agree on that. But what Schoen and Daboll need to avoid is quote unquote shopping hungry, because that's where you're going to make a mistake. And folks, look, it's not easy to find a franchise quarterback. It just isn't. They don't grow on trees. And we can all say that they had their golden opportunity last year. But you know what? You can't stuff the toothpaste back in the tube. All right? Last year is done. You have to look ahead. Is a veteran the answer? Could be. Is a draft pick the answer? Could be. But you have to make sure you make the right decision. And I think, in keeping Daboll, like I said before, there was some question as to whether or not they would keep him, but of course now they are. Daboll's a pretty good evaluator of quarterbacks. So, again, we saw Hard Knocks, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, two guys that he was absolutely enamored with. So far, those guys are panning out. You could also say, well, what about Bo Nix? How did he feel about Bo Nix? He's panning out in Denver. That they didn't show. But anyway, you got to give Daboll a chance to look and see, okay, is Shedeur Sanders my guy? Is Jalen Milroe my guy? Is it Carson Beck? Is it going to be, someone else, Quinn Ayers or whoever? You got to give them that opportunity. But the quarterback position has got to be addressed. It's got to be priority number one. Before they get to that, though, believe it or not, they've got to make a decision on the defense. Is Shane Bowen the guy going forward? Now, you could make an argument and say, well, maybe in year 2 of the system, things will straighten out. You could say, well, the reason why the run defense wasn't as good is because he wasn't able to bring with him the Tennessee Titan personnel like Jeffrey Simmons and those guys. You could make all those arguments. But again, I look at the drop off of Bobby Okereke, Deonte Banks, and this is why I say that maybe Bowen's system was not an ideal fit. So if you're the Giants and you move on from Bowen, maybe you look at Matt Elberfluss, who was fired by the Bears. Maybe you look at Lou Anarumo, who was fired by the Bengals. Those are two guys that I would expect the Giants to look at if they move on from Shane Bowen. Offensively, we've talked about the offensive play calling. Do I think Daboll's going to give that up? I'd like to see him do it. I don't think he will. But if he does, here's a name that I'll throw out for you, who I think would make an excellent offensive coordinator and play caller. Davis Webb out in Denver. Bring him back. I mean, Davis Webb was here the first year of Daboll's tenure. He knows the offense. He's a smart guy. I've always talked about how smart he is and how football savvy he is. Why not give him a crack at it if you're going to move on from Mike Kafka, or better yet, if Mike Kafka is going to move on from you? Mike Kafka having drawn um, an interview request with the Chicago Bears. So that's, these are some of the things that I think, right off the bat, the Giants have to prioritize. What are they going to do with the two coordinators, offense and defense? And then quarterback has to be addressed in some way, shape, or form. We all can agree on that. But you got to be careful. You can't just make snap decisions. And I think, sometimes too many people, think that the answer is so easy and so obvious, and it's not quite as easy or obvious as you would think it is. So we'll see what Daboll does now in the next few days. Obviously, we'll find out which of his staff is staying and which of his staff is not. If there's anything major as far as the coordinators go, I'll do a quick, emergency short for you guys. But I anticipate there's going to be some news coming out the next few days. We'll see when and how much. Otherwise, folks, we'll just keep on rolling right along as we continue our 5 days a week coverage of the New York Giants. Still a lot to get through. And eventually I'll get through it all with you. And then I still want to have, Ed Valentine on again at some point. I want to start having some draft scouts on to talk about the draft. I've got a couple of shows in particular that I'm planning that I think you guys will find interesting. So much is coming up here on the Locked On Giants podcast, and I hope you'll tune in. All right, that's going to do it for us on today's episode of Locked On Giants. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you tomorrow, Giant fans.